Hello and welcome to this update by the Science-Based Targets Initiative. I am Luis Amaral, the SBTi's Chief Executive Officer, presenting today from São Paulo, Brazil. Thank you for joining. We have 5,000 people registered from all across the globe. Today's event will be in English and translated live into Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Mandarin. Select your language on the bottom of the screen. We're broadcasting live on Zoom and on YouTube. The recording will be available on YouTube after the events. All attendees had the opportunity to submit questions in advance. Any more questions can be typed in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will answer as many as possible today. I'm pleased to be joined today by two colleagues from the SBTi's Executive Leadership Team, or ELT. Maria Uters is the SBTi's first Chief Impact Officer, who I'm very pleased to say joined the initiative in January. Maria has extensive experience in senior leadership roles and brings the voice of businesses to SBTi. I'm also joined by a man who needs no introduction, SBTi Chief Technical Officer and co-founder, Alberto Pineda. We are also joined behind the scenes by SBTi colleagues who will also be answering as many questions as possible in writing. With that, let me begin. The IPCC AR6 synthesis report published last week was our final warning. Only immediate, large-scale action can avert climate breakdown. This action cannot be the responsibility of governments alone. Companies and financial institutions must play their part. Many of them already are, but the world needs every single one of them to take immediate action. The SBTi's work is now more important than ever to enable a stable future for the next generation. Near-term action is vital to prevent climate breakdown. We only have left 7 years to keep 1.5 within reach. The good news is that organizations with validated science-based targets have proven monumental reductions are possible. They have cut scope 1 and 2 emissions by 12% year on year, greater than the 7.6 reductions required to achieve 1.5. However, the rate at which climate is changing means that every company must take action across their entire value chains. The scale and impact of work is growing in response to the increasing urgency of the climate crisis. You will shortly hear about some of our recent technical developments, including our steps towards technical completeness and to strengthen our technical decision-making. You also hear about the final steps in completing the SBTi's leadership team. But first, I want to reflect on some of the developments and achievements of the past year. 2022 was the biggest year yet for the SBTi. And here's a short video we developed to highlight that impact to date. As you saw, more companies and financial institutions had their targets validated in 2022 than the previous 6 years combined. And we did this video at the end of the year, and it's already outdated because these numbers have changed. We now have almost 200 companies validated in line with our highest level of ambition, the net zero standard. And this includes some of the biggest, most impactful companies in the world. Science-based targets from financial institutions quadrupled in 2022. By the end of last year, 23% of Fortune 500 companies had targets validated. The amount of emissions covered by commitments and targets reached 3 gigatons of emissions. That represents about 15% of scope 1 and 2 emissions of listed companies all across the globe. In addition, 96% of SBTi targets to date and 98% of the targets validated in 2023 include scope 3 emissions. We also saw particularly impressive growth in the uptake of science-based targets from other areas, for example, businesses based in Asia. Congratulations to all those companies and financial institutions for taking this important step towards cutting emissions. And congratulations as well to those that took the first step by committing to submit their targets for validation within 2 years. By the end of 2022, an additional 2,000 companies and financial institutions had targets validated, and over more than 2,000 had also committed to do so. I look forward to seeing the progression from commitments to targets by those companies. And if there are any companies or financial institutions listening today who have yet to start the journey, I urge you to commit and to set a target. You can do it on SBTi's website and join the thousands of other trailblazers across the globe. As demand for science-based targets soared, the SBTi upscaled and is strengthened to meet this demand over the past year. We improved our target validation service to increase the number of targets validated on a monthly basis by 78%. Ever soaring demand means we must now increase this capacity even further. We implemented new processes as well to support companies in setting targets, and last year we answered more than 6,000 inquiries by those companies. We doubled the size of our team last year, so we now have about 100 people worldwide. And we're also adding new expertise and skills. For example, newcomers coming from Silicon Valley, from finance institutions, from multilaterals, and for leading environmental experts from academia and researchers. Finally, we're also strengthening our framework. As you saw, we announced our new compliance director and implemented a new compliance policy. This places the focus firmly on targets rather than commitments and brings additional transparency to those processes. In 2022, we also saw government interest in science-based targets increase. I had the honor of attending COP27 in November, when US President Joe Biden announced plans to make science-based targets mandatory for all major US government contractors. Also at COP, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' high-level expert group on net zero published its report. This introduced a shared vision on what ambition and success looks like and included several positive references to SBTi. The SBTi team is working to ensure all of the report's recommendations are embedded into our work. And earlier in 2022, Norway also announced plans to ensure that all state-owned companies set science-based targets. The national and international level support for SBTi and our work is testament to the team's expertise and deliverables. But I know we still have a lot of work to do. Last year, I committed to enhancing our governance and operations. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we're incorporating SBTi as two entities, a charity and a subsidiary. This is a very common model to charities in the UK, which was the choice of jurisdiction we made. The charity will be responsible for standard setting. Target validation will be carried by the subsidiary. The purpose of this model will be to further enhance the firewalls between standard setting and target validation. We're also making our governance even more robust in 3 key ways. First, as I announced it, we're bringing more global expertise to our board. The first names will be announced soon. Second, we're announcing our technical council, an important new body for technical decision-making, and Alberto will share more details about it shortly. Finally, as I have mentioned, we have expanded and strengthened the SBTi executive leadership team. I have the great pleasure of introducing now an integral part of that team, Maria Alters. Maria, back to you.
Thank you so much, Luis. And it's a pleasure to be speaking to all of you today as part of the SBTi. So I'm Maria Alters, a Chief Impact Officer for the SBTi. And I'm talking to you today from Paris, where I've lived for more than 30 years. I'm Portuguese by nationality, and I've worked in several countries across the world. As Luis mentioned, I joined the SBTi from the corporate sector, and I see myself as the SBTi's bridge between business and our world-class science. So having spent more than 25 years on the corporate side, I think I know what it is like to be in the C-suite of a big business with all the pressures and competing priorities that it brings. I worked in strategic planning, in HR, sustainability, corporate responsibility, and marketing. And I came to realize the role and responsibility companies have to be sustainable and in line with science. I also experienced what it is like to navigate the many different sustainability initiatives and schemes for businesses. Just before joining the SBTi, I spent the last 16 years at multinational food and facilities management company called Sodexo, trying to connect the business strategy and the sustainable strategy. While at Sodexo, I went through the process of committing to set science-based targets, then developing the actual targets, and then I got a huge sense of achievement when those targets were validated by the SBTi. So when I choose to move out of the corporate world and join civil society, SBTi was the natural choice. And almost 3 months in, I couldn't be happier about my decision. So this year, my team, the SBTi Impact Team, will be focused on enabling companies in the high-emitting sectors, as well as those in the Global South, to set science-based targets. We will also be developing additional partnerships to amplify our reach and ensure that as many companies and financial institutions as possible start on the target-setting journey. As Luis mentioned, and as the IPCC report made it again very clear, with every day that passes, the chance of keeping under 1.5 diminishes. And so everyone must act now. And my team and I are waiting to support you. I would like also to take the opportunity today, in the follow-up of Luis, to introduce you to the full SBTi executive leadership team. This group will be complete next week when Anita Shet will join us as our first compliance director. Anita joins us from Fair Trade International, where she built a reputation as a global leader in her field. So I speak on behalf of the rest of the executive leadership team and the whole SBTi teams when I say how pleased we are to have her joining us. This is a critical part and a critical role of the wider program of work to strengthen SBTi governance, which includes, as Luis just mentioned, the incorporation and board expansion. I'm also delighted to mention that Paul Simpson, former CDP CEO, recently joined us as strategic advisor. Paul is already doing excellent work, supporting us to develop our offering for financial institutions, and we greatly value his experience and expertise. So the final part of this strengthening, and I would like to mention it because it's the big part of where the discussions will be today, is the introduction of SBTi Independent Technical Council. And for that, it's with great pleasure that I hand over to Alberto to tell you more about it, along with some other key technical developments.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Alberto Carrillo. I'm Chief Technical Officer for the SBTi and one of the co-founders of the initiative. I'm really excited to share with you some of the most important changes in the SBTi from a technical point of view. These changes include changes across three important dimensions. The first one is expanding the coverage of the SBTi resources to facilitate the adoption of science-based targets across the entire economy. The second one is continuing to push the envelope of knowledge and best practice in climate target setting and implementation. And the third one is about strengthening our technical governance and our technical decision-making processes. Today, I will share the evolution of our target setting framework, including new developments within the SBTi. More importantly, I will also be sharing more about the evolution of our governance and about our new technical council. Next quarter, we will be publishing our new standard setting protocols. And I'm also happy to share that we're going to be publishing our work program for 2023 to 2025. This is the first time that we will share our plans in such level of detail. And while some of our timelines are indicative, we expect that sharing this program of work will increase visibility to our technical development pipeline. It will also highlight opportunities for feedback so that you can contribute and help shape our work program. Let me start by sharing a high-level overview of the sector-specific guidance within the SBTi. As many of you know, virtually every company can set science-based targets today. However, we recognize the importance of developing sector-specific guidance for high-emitting sectors to ensure that science-based targets are adopted in a robust and standardized way. We are currently doing this for 14 sectors of the economy. In fact, in the final months of 2022, the SBTi published sector-specific guidance for sectors which are responsible for 1/3 of global emissions, including forest, land use and agriculture, cement, and the shipping sector. Since then, interest in science-based target setting has increased in these sectors. We validated new targets from international cement companies, Holcim, Cemex, and Titan Cement Group, and High Developed Cement. We also validated flag targets from Danone and Remy Cointreau, including targets for the land use sector. We're also making strong progress across other sectors, including oil and gas, steel, buildings, and we're also planning to start revision of our target setting guidance for the transport and power sectors. Now, let me share more detail about some of the projects that are currently in the works. The oil and gas sector is both one of the most important and challenging sectors to decarbonize. Fossil fuels represent the largest source of emissions, and therefore having a robust standard for science-based decarbonization for this sector is critical. To guide the development of guidance for this sector, we normally start with development of research. And last year we convened an expert advisory group and published 2 reports. And these reports are the basis upon which we are revising the guidance and upon which we will be publishing guidance for consultation later this year. Now, let me talk about the finance sector. The reputation of the SBTi in the financial sector was further cemented in January when we launched the guidance to identify the complementary nature of our finance framework and TCFD. And we have also seen an influx of financial institutions setting science-based targets, including NatWest Group, Schroders, and Commercial International Bank Egypt. We're also working to develop and to launch the Net Zero standard for financial institutions, which we hope will be a game changer for the sector, just as our corporate Net Zero standard was a few years ago. For steel, buildings, and chemicals, we are running public consultations and advancing the development of guidance for these sectors. And we expect to be launching guidance for these sectors over the course of 2023. Now, moving away from sectors and to some of the areas where SBTi is pushing the boundary of innovation and best practice for target setting, Let me share some of the very exciting developments we're working on. For scope 3 guidance that, as you know, represents the largest share of emissions for most companies on the planet, in average 11 times higher than direct emissions. We are developing guidance that will help companies implement targets in a robust way. And as part of our due process, we launched a process last year to capture the views of stakeholders to inform the development of our guidance. Earlier this year, last year we carried out a stakeholder survey, and we published the results of this survey in our blog earlier this year. We will be releasing updates on this guidance later in 2023. The next area I want to highlight is the work on beyond value chain mitigation. And as many of you know, this is the term that we have used for the financing of mitigation activities outside of the value chain of a company. We are aware of some of the misunderstandings of the position of SBTi in this area. There are some stakeholders that have misinterpreted our position as not being supportive of project-based finance through carbon markets and others, and this is not the case. We want to incentivize and catalyze as much finance as possible from the private sector, first and foremost to make sure that companies deploy the finance needed to decarbonize their businesses, but also to go above and beyond and to finance mitigation beyond their value chains. And as part of this, SBTi is developing guidance to give companies the confidence in channeling finance to support mitigation outside of their value chain in a robust and credible way. We are currently conducting a survey that will help inform our work on beyond value chain mitigation. And companies are invited to take part of this survey before the end of this month. And you can scan the code on the screen or click the link on the chat box to submit your input for this consultation. We will also be releasing further updates on this guidance later in the year. The final area I want to highlight to our work is the development of measurement, reporting, and verification, or MRV criteria, and then the development of performance criteria. Through this work, we intend to increase transparency and accountability of corporate climate action by enabling the disclosure of progress and the assessment of delivery against targets in a clear, robust, and standardized way. We will also be sharing more information about this important work in the program of work that we're going to be releasing in the coming weeks. To summarize, let me recap some of the key developments for SBTi this year from a technical point of view. The first one is to complete the transition towards our new technical governance model that includes the setup of the technical council that we are announcing today. We also started the process to reforming the technical advisory group, and we will be doing the same for our scientific advisory group. We are developing and publishing our standard setting protocols so that everyone understands the process that we follow to develop technical resources and to make technical decisions. And as I mentioned earlier, we are releasing also our 2023-2025 program of work that will provide clarity on the projects and programs that SBTi is going to be working on in this period. The second highlight is the development of the oil and gas sector guidance, which we expect we're going to be publishing a first consultation towards the end of this year. Then we are also working on development of guidance for a number of sectors, notably steel, buildings, and chemicals. As I mentioned, we are working hard at the development of the net zero standard for financial institutions that we expect to release in a few weeks for consultation and a final version towards the end of the year. And finally, we are pushing the boundary on important areas for climate target setting, including scope 3, beyond value chain mitigation, and MRV, which are some of the key projects that SBTi is working on this year. Finally, I also want to highlight that we're also working to address loopholes in our framework and to make sure that we incorporate the latest research and key learnings from experts throughout the sector. All of our work is developed in collaboration with experts in industry, academia, and science. We invite all of those with relevant expertise to be part of our public consultations, and you can share more information on our website and in the work program that we are releasing in the next few weeks. The recognition of the importance of scrutiny is at the core of our new technical governance structure, and that's what I'm very happy to share with you today, our new technical governance and our new technical council. As shared by Luis, the new technical governance will further enhance our framework and the methods and guidance that we develop to ensure that they continue to be effective, rigorous, and credible. At the core of our approach is a group of bodies formed as independent experts to guide the development and to help us ensure the robustness of our technical resources, including the Technical Council, the Technical Advisory Group, the Scientific Advisory Group, and our Expert Advisory Groups. I know all of these groups sound very familiar, but they all play a very distinct and very important roles to our process. Let me clarify the difference. First, we have our advisory bodies that include project-specific advisory groups, or EAGs, which normally we convene to support the development of specific projects. If you go to the next slide, please. For example, the oil and gas project is one project where we convene an expert advisory group where we bring experts of that sector to help us guide the development of the project. We also have the scientific advisory group and the technical advisory group. There are two permanent advisory groups in the SBTi and that provide scientific and practitioners' perspective throughout the development of SBTi technical resources. Unlike these groups that play an advisory role, the Technical Council that we are announcing today is a permanent and independent body that will support review and decision-making. This group is appointed and overseen by our executive board, and they will be serving for a term of 2 years. The group includes a chair who will act as liaison between the council and the executive board. The scope of the Technical Council includes all normative documentation within the SBTi, including the development and revision of pathways, target setting methods, standards, cross-sector guidance, and sector-specific guidance. All the normative work that we develop in the SBTi is under the remit of the Technical Council. We started the process of appointing our Technical Council in September 2022 via an open recruitment process. We worked with a headhunting firm to help ensure access to the broadest pool of candidates and to manage this process in a robust and professional way. We wanted to ensure representation and true diversity of gender, nationality, background, and thought. Most importantly, we also wanted experts who would act independently, who would support and bring solutions, and who wouldn't be afraid to question, probe, and disagree. We believe that the benefit that they will provide will be definitely greater than the sum of their parts. And with this, I'm happy to share with you the composition of our Technical Council. First, I want to introduce to our chair and vice chair. Our chair will be Dr. Cornelis Bloch. He's an extremely well-regarded expert in energy systems analysis and the lead author of the IPCC report. And our vice chair is going to be Dr. Laura Drucker, who brings her exceptional reputation and knowledge of corporate climate mitigation. They are joined by 13 Technical Council members that span across 4 key areas. Let me walk you through. The first of these areas is mitigation scenarios and pathways. And in addition to Dr. Cornelis Bloch, we also have Dr. Stephanie Rowe and Dr. Stephen Davis, both of them also renowned scientists and key contributors to IPCC reports. The second area that I want to highlight is environmental impact, life cycle assessment, and greenhouse gas accounting. These are the experts that help us ensure that we implement the science in a robust way in our framework by looking at the accounting aspects and methodological aspects of our work. And here we have 4 experts: Dr. Michael Gillenwater, Owen Hewlett, Pankaj Pathia, and Dr. Anders Bjorn. All of them are going to be helping us ensure the robustness from the accounting and methodological perspective of science-based target setting. The third area that I want to highlight is those experts that come with a private sector mitigation perspective. And I already introduced our Vice Chair, Dr. Laura Drucker. And I also want to highlight Dr. Nicole Ruthman, Dr. Ben Caldecott, Pedro Faria, Dr. Simi Tambi, and Maria Virginia Vilariño, all of whom come with a relevant experience in private sector mitigation across the corporate sector, the industrial sector, the financial sector, and also the land use sector. And all of them will help us ensure that our resources are developed and pragmatic and that they can be implemented in a robust way. Finally, I want to highlight an area that we find very important for the evolution of our framework and that we decided to include also in our technical council, which is equity and environmental justice. And here we have 2 experts in this first cohort of the technical council of the SBTi. The first one is Professor Doreen Stavinsky, and the second one is Mandy Rambaros. All of these are experts that represent scientific and technical expertise at the highest level. Finally, I'm also excited to say that we will be launching another call for additional technical council members soon, with the idea of expanding the diversity and the background and expertise of the group. Please keep an eye on our website and our newsletter for more information of this. With this, I want to thank you all for your time, and now I will hand back to Luis.
Well, thank you so much, Alberto. Thank you so much, Maria, for that very comprehensive updates. And most of that, thank you so much for all your team's excellent work. The amazing developments that have taken in SBTi through this year are only because of this fantastic team that works with you across geographies to deliver on this level of ambition. So thank you so much for you and the SBTi team. Today, we talked about how the SBTi is growing, how it's growing in impact, how it's growing in size, and how it's growing on institutional strengths. We have shared a snapshot of our recent developments, and you've heard of our plans for strengthening our organization and our technical governance moving forward. Not only on the governance, but also, as Alberto pointed out, moving towards technical completeness. Underpinning it all is transparency and collaboration. So I hope you take every opportunity to work with us, to work with the SBTi experts, to work with our teams in 2023 and beyond, as we show that the world that 1.5 is still within reach. And that is true, especially for the leading companies that are taking ambition action and are leading the way. It can be done, and there are many companies that are showing it can. Now, let's move into the Q&A part of this webinar. We have received a huge number of questions, which I thank you all for it. And in order to help us manage that part of the discussion, I'll hand it over to Luisa, our fantastic head of communications, to lead. Luisa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Luis, and thank you everyone for joining us today and for so many questions. We received a huge number of questions before today for many, many attendees, so thank you so much. And the questions are still coming in. So we will do our best to cover as many as we can today. So I'm going to ask all the panelists to keep the questions relative, or the answers relatively short. We will see how many we can get through. I'm going to start. I've made some notes of some of the questions on paper here, but forgive me in a moment if I'm looking at various different screens to try and pick up as many questions as possible. But we'll start. First of all, I have a question, and I think probably this would be good for you, Luis. So how does the SBTi intend to keep up with increasing demand from companies? And in fact, we've had a couple of similar questions along this line, and questions asking about a little bit about wait time and obviously about the huge growth in demand recently.
Well, thanks a lot, Luisa, and thanks, folks, for the questions. As I mentioned, in 2022, we assessed more than 1,300 companies, out of which we validated about 1,000 of those companies in line with science. This process has improved by 80% over the year, and that's more than all the previous 6 years combined. We significantly increased the capacity of our validation team to deliver on this, and we will continue to do so. We also have continued to see demand for both near and long-term net zero science-based targets to grow, and continue to increase capacity of our teams to deliver. And we're also adding expertise from elsewhere to get to those targets. So as I gave you examples, our team today, last year, has more than doubled, and we're continuing to hire and increase the capacity of the team. But it's not just adding more arms, it is adding more processes and more technology to that process. As I mentioned, we brought expertise from folks from Silicon Valley to finance sector that are developing new ways of working and new processes and methods to guarantee that 80% growth in terms of efficiency continues to go faster. I joke with my team, if you look at our previous numbers from the previous years, they're all 100% growth, 80% growth, 120% growth. So if we were still on my previous private sector years, everybody would be getting a big bonus check at the end of the year for that delivery. But we all chose to come and move to work for a civil society organizations. We're not getting any bonuses. And it's still not enough. We need to go faster and further, and that's why we're doing those investments. Finally, I just wanted to make one final point on that continued growth. This year, we really started to see the power of supply chain and the power of Scope 3 picking up. And that is fantastic, because that's exactly what supply chain and Scope 3, that is the engine that made this ripple into a wave, and it is going to make into even a bigger wave as we grow in other regions. For example, as I mentioned, we saw Asia growing faster than other regions. We also see significant growth in SMEs, and that has a lot to do with the power of supply chain Scope 3. Companies bringing their peers and bringing their suppliers in. That's the type of transformation that we want.
Thank you very much, Luis. And on to the next question. Will the SBTi be doing more to better engage with other NGOs and with the science and academic communities? And I think that's an answer for Maria. Sorry, a question for Maria. If you're happy to answer that, Maria.
Yes, and happy to, just bounce back on what Luis and Alberto said. I think we can definitely be very proud of the fact that SBTi was founded to drive ambitious climate action based on the best climate science, which includes and requires collaboration and support from the world's leading climate scientists, academia. All of them are very fundamental. And Alberto shared some. I would like to reinsist that, yes, absolutely, NGOs and civil society play a crucial role in driving more climate action, and SBTi is continually striving to improve alignment and collaboration with civil society to drive faster action. So not perfect, but a lot was done, and we'll continue to do a lot more as there are many players in this space.
Thank you. And as you can appreciate, there have been a lot of technical questions or questions around our technical work. And we've received quite a lot of questions around Scope 3. So what I suggest is that we move on, and I'm going to ask 2 different Scope 3 questions out of the many that we've received. And I'm going to put those to you, Alberto, if I may. So first of all, I'm going to ask if you can elaborate a bit, please, on the upcoming Scope 3 development and what areas does this entail?
Thanks, Luisa. Yes, very happy to. The first thing that I want to mention is, as I mentioned during my presentation, we started with a survey that we conducted last year to understand different challenges that exist in the adoption of and implementation of Scope 3 targets. And so we identified areas that have to do with how Scope 3 emissions are calculated. We identified challenges with the methods that are available for Scope 3 target setting. And I would say the main challenge that we found, and that as many of you are familiar with, is the challenges that exist around the traceability and availability of data in the supply chain, in the value chain, and the challenge that this implies for implementing changes and also for tracking progress around Scope 3 targets. And so I would say these are the key areas that we are planning to tackle in our guidance. And as you can imagine, it's a massive challenge. So we also are planning to approach this project in a very collaborative way with other key actors in the ecosystem, including, for instance, accounting standards, those that are working on the implementation of technological solutions to address data challenges, etc. But yeah, these are the key areas that we want to tackle in our Scope 3 guidance. And you can check the results of the survey on our website.
Okay, thank you very much. And another Scope 3 question. What are the methods for calculating Scope 3 emissions effectively?
Well, for calculation, we use the greenhouse gas protocol as the basis. And so, yeah, all the methods that are recognized in the greenhouse gas protocol are the ones that we allow as part of the target setting process. As I mentioned, there are a number of challenges that companies face when they calculate Scope 3 emissions, and also to track progress against targets depending on the method that they use. And so this is one of the areas that we're going to be developing in more detail in our guidance.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's a lot of questions, I think, Alberto, that are aimed at you, or lots of quite specific technical questions. So we'll come back to you for a moment, but I'm going to cover a couple of slightly more general questions that we've had in as well. One, and I think this came in while we were speaking today, one that I'm going to put to you, Luis, which is, why should businesses be setting 1.5 degree targets when 1.5 is looking at increasingly unlikely to be met, obviously off the back of the latest IPCC report as well?
Thanks, Luisa, and thanks for the person that asked that question. I think that's a very good one, right? I would say, I mean, I spend most of my time on the private sector as well. What happens if you have an objective of meeting some commercial goals, and then you start to falling behind? You give up on those goals, or do you actually accelerate towards those goals? And I think that's the message, right? Companies can do their fair share, even though we do know the report from the IPCC shows that we have to act, and every time that passes make it more difficult for us at a global level. It does not mean that it changes the capacity of a company to do what is right and to do their fair share. So, and we have 2,000 companies out there that have proven that they can set their targets and they can do it, and they can do their fair share. So I think that is why it is so imperative that companies need to continue to keep the level of ambition, and even more accelerate the level of ambition. Because if we are to keep the 1.5, or even if we miss that target, if we are to keep as close as we can, we need companies that are leading to do their share part and keep the 1.5 plans in place. And they can do it. We have seen it happen.
Thank you very much, Luis. Moving on then, again, I think actually this is a question for you, Maria, and I think you touched on it a little bit in your last question, but it's slightly different. And again, this is one that came in live while we were speaking. In the new structure, will SBTi be able to engage with trade associations and their members on developing science-based targets?
Yes, thank you, Louisa, and thank you to the person who asked the question. I would say, of course, yes. Again, it needs to be relevant, and we have a responsibility to really set the bar. And again, we will be very happy to be working with trade associations that want to entice and be the voice to their members to follow and adopt SBTi guidances. So I have already experienced a few examples, and I would look for more. Absolutely, that's one of the ways for us to amplify our message across the different companies and industries.
Thank you very much, Maria. Okay, there's a question here just asking for a bit of clarification on a point around the net zero standard. So it says in the net zero standard, one of the key requirements is around doing work outside your science-based targets, or outside of your value chain rather. What does that mean when you talk about outside your value chain? And actually, that would be a question, I think, for you. Sorry, Alberto.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, this is a very good question. Normally, what we refer to as beyond value chain mitigation, which is recognized in the net zero standard, is basically actions that companies take to finance mitigation or abatement of activities that are not necessarily linked to their value chain, so where they are sourcing their materials or products, or where they are selling their products. And so an example is, for instance, a lot of companies finance the deployment of efficient cook stoves in rural areas, right? And these cook stoves help reduce emissions, they help reduce deforestation, and they improve health. So they're very important from a sustainability point of view, but they're happening beyond the value chain of a company. And so this is an example. Others are supporting, for instance, finance to protect nature and implement nature-based solutions. And so these are all these activities that fall beyond what is within the value chain of a company.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask another question, actually, which I think will be for you, Alberto. And it says, basically, if we need to make reductions of 7.6%, when will the SBTi increase the required reduction rate above 4.2? And that, I think, refers to something that Luis was talking about earlier. But again, if that's something that you could pick up, that would be great. Thanks, Alberto.
Yes, thanks, Lisa. Well, actually, this is a good opportunity to highlight also an important development for us in the SBTi, which is as part of evolution and growth. We recently created a research team and appointed our head of research, who is basically in charge of maintaining and strengthening the scientific foundations of science-based target setting. And this includes, for instance, the continuous revision and maintenance of the pathways that are used for science-based target setting. And so as part of one of the key priorities for our research team is precisely to revise the target setting pathways that are used in our framework to make sure that they are in line with the latest pathways, of course, the ones reviewed by the IPCC as part of the 6th assessment report, but also all the pathways that have become available, for instance, bottom-up pathways that can enable target setting at the sectoral level, other pathways that provide pathways for different sectors. And so I would say this is a key task of our research team, and they're going to be doing this review later in the year. And so we're going to revise our thresholds as part of that process.
Thank you very much, Alberto. I'm hoping we've got time for just a few more questions, and particularly if we've got some short answers. So there's a question here. I'm going to throw this to you, Luis. Just to understand a little bit more, so what role did the SBTi have in the recent H-leg recommendations which were highlighted?
Thanks. Yeah, well, we are a player on this ecosystem as any other player. So we had the role as any other player has. We made the suggestions and participated on the consultations as any other player have doing that. And we were very, as I mentioned, well, once the H-leg report was announced, we made some declarations that were very happy with the outcome, because I think it helps us all drive in the same direction, was very aligned with the vision of SBTi's a vision of ambition and very high level ambition. And we're currently working with the team to see where and what is needed for us to further enhance our processes and our standards. So we're doing this assessment in accordance in the basis of the H-leg report. So that alignment is very welcome and needed. So we welcome the outcomes of that process. So before jumping in, Luisa, which relates to that, I also wanted to pick a question that was mentioned to Maria, and it relates to this one, which is leveraging the ecosystem, right? When we started 7 years ago or so, we were the only kid on the block. Gladly, that is no longer the case, right? Gladly, we need a whole ecosystem to work together to get us to corporate ambition, corporate climate action. And as Maria pointed out, we are very keen and continue to work with the ecosystem to help and facilitate the work of others, pick and focus on what we bring best to the table, and then also depend on others to actually go on and implement this. So making this whole machine work is one of our key priorities, as Maria mentioned, in leveraging the ecosystem. And for example, last year, the question on working with others, last year, you saw that we announced some MOUs working with others, for example, with the Mission Possible Partnership. There are more MOUs that are coming along. The reform of our governance, enhancing the size and the types of consultation processes, types of governance mechanisms that have different views. It's all part of that idea that we need to make 1 + 1 = 3, = 5, = 10 to deliver on our goals, on our common goals.
Thank you very much, Luis. And I think we've got time for one very short response. I'm going to throw this question open to you, Alberto. There have been a few questions asking for just a little bit more information about what new sectors we might be looking at. I think people had asked maybe about media, IT, various different questions about additional sector guidance. So if there's anything you can tell us very quickly about any future sector guidance, and then finally about any updates, just to clarify around any updates for existing guidance.
Thanks, Luisa. So let me highlight first the sectors that we are currently working on. So this includes oil and gas, steel, buildings, and chemicals. These are the sectors we are currently working on. Then later in the year, we plan to start the revision of the guidance for the transport sector, including automotive and aviation. And so these are the sectors that we currently have in our pipeline that we're going to be working on for sure. And we're in the scoping phase of other sectors, including aluminum and pulp and paper. And so the feasibility of those sectors, something we're going to determine later in the year. But yeah, those are the sectors that we are currently working on and are currently in our pipeline. And the second thing I wanted to highlight, as I mentioned in my presentation, we are planning to release in the next few weeks our 2023-2025 program of work. They're going to provide an overview of the SBTi pipeline for the next couple of years, and you can find much more details about our technical development pipeline in that document.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, Alberto. And thank you, Luis and Maria, too, for your answers. And thank you to our colleagues behind the scenes, who have been answering as many questions in writing as possible. We have had an enormous amount of questions. It is going way into the hundreds. So apologies if we haven't had time to answer yours today. But thank you so much, and thank you for your interest. And back now over to you, Luis. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Luisa. Thank you most of everything for all of you that joined us today, for all of you that go up in the morning and sleep at the night, thinking about how to solve our global climate crisis, thinking how we can make businesses better, how can we enhance this ecosystem. We're so proud of the work that SBTi do, and we are so grateful for your support and for your work, because it's really a coalition and cooperation that can deliver on those goals that we all share. We know the planet is at an inflection point. The scientific evidence, it's clear and clearer and clearer. Global heating has already caused dangerous disruptions in nature, human well-being, businesses, and economies across all regions. And we all know that the window to keep 1.5 temperature grow and avoid more catastrophic impacts is nearly shut. So every fraction of degree matters. Every company matters. Every new action matters. And we've learned that it's not in the distant future anymore. It is here. I think one of the most impressive graphs that came out of the IPCC report that I've used to share with folks that do not work on corporate climate ambition as we do, I will be 70 by 2050. My daughter will be 35. So it's not something distant in the future. We're not doing that for us, but it's about our kids and our daughters, which are going to be there very soon, feeling those impacts. We need to do the most we can to guarantee that we're delivering on those goals. I hope this presentation has shown that SBTi is doing, that we're doing our part to play in our driving corporate climate action in line with science, on standardizing what success looks like. Because we need that definition of success. We need to really set what the goal is if we are to all be rowing towards the same direction. And I think this, in my opinion, is the biggest value that we as SBTi bring to everyone. We also do know that we need to play our part. We have made tremendous advances, but we want to go farther, faster. Every government, every business, every person must do everything they can to limit the impacts of the dangerous climate change, both for us and for future generations. Finally, for business and financial institutions that are listening, that means committing to set a science-based target in line with science today, and then to act on it. So thank you all again for joining. Really appreciated your time. See you next time.